All right, so today I'd like to give a quick overview of ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, why it is a social justice issue, and the stigmas associated with it, and mental wellness practices that people with ME might use to survive. Okay, go ahead. ME is a severe multi-system illness that devastates a person's mental and physical energies. It's very similar to Gulf War syndrome, and people who have ME cannot overexert mentally or physically, or they pay a very big price for it. It's associated with a lot of symptoms. People will typically have constant colds or temperatures, sleep deprivation or sleep issues, pain, mental fog, and it can have severe reactions to mold and chemical toxins as well as sensory inputs. It's not at all a rare disease. It's hard to get exact numbers on because there's no diagnostic test for it, but estimates are between 800,000 and maybe 2 million or more Americans have it. Okay, next one. So like my wife, Julie, up to about 2/3 or more people with ME cannot work or go to school, not even part-time. And a full 25% are fully housebound or even fully bedbound. And this can last for decades or even for the rest of their lives. In Julie's case, the exhaustion might mean that she wakes up at 10 or 11 and then spends the day in a reclining chair playing on the computer until about 2:30 when she gets Danny from school. And maybe she'll save up energy and go to the store or cook dinner. And meanwhile, she spends the day feeling mad at herself and lazy and upset at another wasted day. And because of it. And we had our vacation last week, and the most energetic part of it for her was where we went to a kids' bingo party for an hour. She didn't even win a game. And it left her exhausted, quite exhausted for the next day to recover from the mental stimulation of that. But she's an average case, really. For a more severe person, they might go to the mailbox if they can spend the rest of the day in bed, and they'd probably pay a price for that. An even more extreme case might spend their lives in bed in a darkened room to avoid sensory input. So, from a mental point of view, if Julie's on a phone call or a discussion or attends a large gathering like a Prairie UU service, she can't keep up with that, and the mental strain and inputs and noises and having to talk and all that would wear her out and make her quite tired for several days. She was sick for a few days after the last ME awareness event because she was on the panel and had to speak and be in front of people. But I'm not doing this for Julie. I'm doing this because this is a social justice issue based on the size of the epidemic, the severity of the symptoms, and quite frankly, the lack of a support system for it. I'm doing it for the millions missing, as we call our annual rallies, people who are missing from their lives, jobs, schools, and friends, people under virtual house arrest with no real hope of change. And there's, I know, a lot of people at Prairie whose lives are touched in very deep ways by illnesses, cancers, depression, divorce, all kinds of life circumstances. And I don't mean to minimize that pain, and it's very real, and we hope that people in these circumstances can gain some solace and advice from today's talk. Okay, so next. So why should Prairie have a service specifically on ME? Researchers measure quality of life of people with diseases, and people with severe ME describe it as a living death or living with end-stage HIV/AIDS for decades at a time. Researchers specifically, darn, wrong one. Can you go forward one more? Or the other backwards? Backwards? Okay, thank you. So people with ME have significantly lower quality of life than people with many different kinds of cancer, MS, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and quite frankly, any disease that researchers could measure, people with ME scored significantly lower on the quality of life. Okay, so can you go forward? And so to help with that, we'll look at the FDA-approved treatments. Only it turns out there aren't any, so we'll just skip that slide and go on. So here's where funding is at. So you can see ME is this very tiny sliver compared to many other diseases that rate as less severe quality of life. Due to recent advocacy efforts, you can as much as triple that ME bar, but that's still a drop in the bucket. Okay, so now we can look at support networks, and you can go to like supermarkets and be asked to donate to Children's Hospital or the March of Dimes or Autism Speaks, and these are all really good causes. So you can go to rallies and walks and marches for other major diseases, and you'll see tons of corporate sponsors and community sponsors and groups of people raising really deep, meaningful amounts of money. And when you turn to ME, honestly, Prairie is by far the biggest supporter of people with ME in the state of Colorado, so that's wonderful for a church of this size. I'm really proud of you, and that's kind of why we want to ask Prairie to walk with people with severe ME as a social justice partner. Okay, so enough on that. We'll go on to kind of the wellness practices. Let's see. So why is the science in such poor shape? It's because of stigma, both intentionally caused and as caused by human nature. So after a severe outbreak of ME in Lake Tahoe in the 1980s, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, had a chance to stab at the heart of ME. But instead they chose to sweep it under the carpet and blamed it on mass hysteria because, of course, it mostly affects women and they all look normal. So yeah, I can just complain, it's all in their heads. And they coined the term chronic fatigue syndrome, which is insulting and misleading and derogatory. And, you know, quite honestly, I'm kind of tired and a bit lazy too. So, you know, I should stay home and take some sick days like you do too, right? Because and the CDC did that on purpose and the damage was done. Where are we at? What's the next one? Okay, thanks. So the second reason is that ME is the opposite of no pain, no gain. So if someone overdoes it mentally or physically, they experience severe relapse. And that adds to the stigma because you have people who are looking perfectly normal and quite frankly don't seem to be trying it because they're trying to avoid a relapse. In fact, there was a fraudulent study that claimed that graded exercise therapy combined with cognitive behavioral therapy, because again, it was just a bunch of fakers, could cure it. And it wasn't until 2017 that the CDC removed these as guidelines, and it was only last month that Kaiser removed them as recommended cures. And lastly, people see people with ME on their healthiest days. So it's easy for them to kind of get lost from all the days that people spend preparing for or recovering for the lunch date that the person went on. Okay, so now we can go on to... Oh yeah, so since the disease is hard to diagnose, patients have to prove themselves. They're healthy until proven sick. And what's the next one? And they have to go to many doctors. They're often told they're lazy and just work through it, and are often treated for depression. Many people with ME might experience down times and depressive feelings, but that's because of life circumstances. ME is not a depression. So let's talk about wellness now. So Julie does art, and on like good days, she'll go out and do, this is one she recently painted, and on good days, she'll go outside and like play in the garden, and does so what she can for the family, maybe plays with the boys or takes them to appointments. So I asked a question in an online forum of people with ME and their supporters, what works for wellness. And people stress that one side is the day-to-day management and the other is the long-term, no end in sight nature of the illness that causes the most mental anguish and problems. So Cody Nichols from Pueblo came to Denver the night before the Last Millions Missing rally, even though he's too sick to do so much as the dishes because he wanted to say some words of wisdom at our rally. He said that, I will be honest with you all, I am not one that cries easy, but in the 4 years I have been sick, I have wept. I am not saying that I've lost hope, but there are times there is pain that has to be released. Am I depressed? Not at all. But this sickness has given me times of sorrow. I wanted to share something that has helped me through my times, and it is my hope that it will help you. It is from Romans 5:3-5. But we will all glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces endurance, endurance, character, in character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Other advice is giving yourself permission to stop pushing and feel okay with what you've done, lowering standards of housework, really lowering them, parenting from bed, even though it means giving the kids far more electronics than any pediatrician would ever recommend. Some people recommend going on very strict diets to manage your symptoms, and some recommend binging on your comfort foods for comfort. Another person says that for us the challenge has really been mental and spiritual, and more in the area of reshaping life goals and expectations. The big thing for my husband has been reworking his definition of what it means to be a good and successful adult father and husband. Zen Buddhism has really been key. It is the desire to get better that often hurts the most. Acceptance of new life is essential, however you find it. After you accept your new life, you have to redefine your meaning of self-worth. It can't be the definition that our society shapes. From there, it's a daily practice of patience, self-love, and gratitude for everything we do have. And I forgot to mention a couple of the upcoming events if you'd like to be involved in ME activism. I have one more quote I want to end with, but the next big rally is our Millions Missing the day before Mother's Day at the Capitol, and we'd love to see Prairie out there in force. You can see me for more info. And after the service, I'll ask those who are willing and able to stand by a Prairie banner and holding signs in support of ME funding and awareness. Okay, and the last quote is from a person whose family member with ME was considering suicide, and she wrote, to spend as much time talking and listening with him as you can. It is very painful and scary giving voice to despair, especially with one you love, but it is one of the best known ways of alleviating the pressure to act on the feelings. The more he speaks about how he feels, the easier it will be to transform those feelings into something less destructive. It will be hard to hear, but accepting the intensity of his sense of loss will help him bear it better. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned some about ME, and I hope you've taken some advice that might help you or your loved ones. And I want to offer my deepest thanks to the entire Prairie community, and especially Reverend Jan and Timothy, to put on this service on behalf of my wife Julie and Cody Nichols and the Millions Missing. So thank you for shining light on the Millions Missing for us.